Hi, my name's Jacqueline Bakab, and I will be presenting a lesson for third grade on math. So today's topic or today's objective will be rounding to the nearest hundred on a vertical number line. Okay, so in order for us to do that, we will be reviewing what vertical means. So first of all, does anyone know which way vertical goes? Yes, so vertical means you go up and down, okay? So we will be making our number line go up and down. So this is what a vertical number line will look like. So we will be working with vertical number lines, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to review halfway points in order for us to round to the nearest hundred. So if I give you the example, what is the halfway point between 100 and 200? So what is the halfway point? So yes, the halfway point between 100 and 200 is 150. So on a number line, we would make sure we start at 100 with a tick mark. We would end at 200 with a tick mark, and our halfway point would be 150. So our number line should look something like this. Our starting point would be 100, our halfway point would be 150, and our end point would be 200. Good, so let's try another one. So what would the halfway point be between 500 and 600? So I'll give you a second to think. So yes, the halfway point between 500 and 600 would be 550, right? And if we were drawing that on a vertical number line, could anyone tell me what the bottom tick mark would look like? What 100 should I start with? So we would start with 500 at the bottom. Our halfway point would be 550. And our end point would be 600. So your vertical number line should look something like this. Okay? So we're going to try one more. So what would the halfway point be between 300 and 400? So if you said 350, you would be correct. So our halfway point, so if you would do this on your whiteboard with us, can you tell me where would the 300 go? Where should I draw my tick mark? If you said at the bottom, that is correct. The bottom tick mark should say 300. Our halfway point would be 350, and our end point would be 400, right? So that's going to give us a clear view of where we can mark numbers when we are rounding, okay? So that's part of our lesson, knowing the halfway point between hundreds. So we know that 50 usually marks the halfway point, right? So this is how we will be drawing our number lines. So we need to keep that in mind before we can get to rounding. So another concept that I want to go over before we continue is renaming our tens. So we're going to start in unit form. And I would like for you to tell me what 11 tens is. What number would represent 11 tens? Okay, so 11 tens would be 110, right? So if we were to break this up, we know that 10 tens is the same as 100. And we know that 110 is 10. So if you can see the way that we've broken it up, 10 tens is 100 and 110 is the same as 10. And if we add those together, it gives us 110. So we're going to try another one. We're going to try renaming another 10. So I will give it to you in unit form and you can tell me what number it is. We are just renaming. So 13 tenths. What would 13 tenths be? So 13 tenths is the same as 130, right? And again, if we break that up, because we know that 10 tenths is the same as 100, we also know 3 tenths, if we count by tens, 10, 20, 30 is 30. If we add those together, 100 plus 30 is the same as 130. Okay, so that's also another important concept that we are going to use when we are rounding. Okay, so we're going to get started with our problem. So we are going to round 132 to the nearest 100 using a vertical number line. So first I will start by drawing my number line. Remember, vertical goes up and down. So my number line should look something like this. Okay, so in order for us to understand how to label our number line, I want to know how many hundreds are there in 132. How many hundreds are there in 132? So if you said 1, that is correct. There is 100 in 132. So that is what we're going to use as our starting point, right? Because there is 100 hundreds. So that will be our starting point. Okay. If we add one more 100, what is 100 plus 100? So 100 plus 100 is 200. That will be our end point. And this is where our skill comes in. What is the halfway point between 100 and 200? So if you said 150, you are correct. 150 is the halfway point between 100 and 200. Okay. So in order to figure out where 132 rounds to, which 100 is it closest to, we have to figure out where it belongs on our number line, right? So now we have a starting point, a midpoint, and an end point. Okay, and if we know we have 132, I can look at my halfway point and say, is 132 bigger than 150 or is it smaller? So go ahead and think about that and tell me, is 132 bigger than 150 or is it smaller than 150? So if you said smaller, you are correct. So if we know that 132 is less than 150, we know that in order to mark it on our number line, it has to be below 150. We cannot put it above 150 because that would be too many. We have to go below. So 132. Where would we mark that on our number line? So one way that we can check is we can count by tens. 150, we can say this would be about 140, 130, 120, 110, and 100, right? So we can make even smaller tick marks to kind of guide us. So if I have 100, this is where 130 would be because I'm counting by tens. 100, 110, 120, 130. So 132 would be slightly above there. So I'm going to write that just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to put a dot to mark my place. So that would be 132. That is where that would fall on our number line. And then we can look, is it closer to 100 or is it closer to 200? And in this case, because it is below the halfway point, we can see that it is closer to 100. So 132 would round to, and we're going to use these squiggle marks to signify approximately. So 132 rounds to 100. right? So we can try one more. So we are going to round 256 to the nearest 100. So can anyone tell me what I should do first? So yes, I should draw my number line first. And while I'm doing that, can anyone tell me how many hundreds are in 256? So that's going to help us with our starting point. How many hundreds are there in 256? So yes, if you said 2, you are correct. There are 200. So I'm going to use that as my starting point. There is 200s. Okay, if I add 100 more, that would be my end point. So what is 200 plus 100? If you said 300, that is correct. And we're missing one thing. We're missing our halfway mark. Where would the halfway mark be? It would be at 250. Right? Okay, so in order for us to plot 256, I need to think, is that bigger than 250? Is it more than 250 or is it less? So yes, it's more, but only by 6 more. So I know it's not going to be too far above, so I'm going to plot it right on top of the 250. And since it is above the 250, it is closer to our 300 mark. So we know that 256 rounds to 300. So thank you for working with us. Now that we understand what our starting point is, our halfway point, and our end point, that is going to help us round to the nearest 100 on a vertical number line, and it's going to make it much more easier to see where the number is closest to.